The museum opened the blacksmith shop about 3 years ago. And in that shop, we try to stress the historical aspects of blacksmithing. In other words, as opposed to industrial blacksmithing around 1900 and after, we're before the Civil War, say in the late 1700s to mid 1800s. That's what we could consider the period that we represent here at the museum.
And there are only a handful of knife craftsmen in Arkansas that carry the title of Master Bladesmith, and you are one of them. Can you tell us a bit about what goes into earning this title?
Well, yes, it's kind of a long trip. It's a long story, but essentially we can break it down into two parts. As a person wants to attempt his journeyman test, he has to make a knife that will perform, and it has to do certain duties. Among those duties, it has to cut a free-hanging 1-inch rope with one clean sweep. It has to be able to chop a 2x4 in half a few times and still remain sharp. And then it has to be able to have the blade put in a vise and bent 90 degrees without breaking. So that shows that that knife can perform. And the second part of that test is where you take 5 of your show knives or your presentation knives, you present them to a jury, and they judge whether or not you pass or fail. And once you achieve your journeyman rating, of course you get a stamp that you put on your blades or your knife to let people know that this is one of your journeyman smith knives. You've achieved that level. But from there, you go on to your Mastersmith level. And this might take a number of years. It may take you anywhere from 5 years or so, depending, to get your journeyman stamp. And then from there, it might even take longer to get your Mastersmith stamp.
In your opinion, why are people intrigued by bladesmithing?
Well, I guess because it's an old world craft. You're using fire. You're using some of the basic elements that often appeal to people of all types. You got fire. You've got skills and craftsmanship involved. You've got beauty, and you've got function. All those things wrapped up in one object, and that's a knife.
And what attracted you to the craft?
Well, I've always liked knives. I've hunted and fished a lot in my life, still do, and I like to have a good knife that performs. And I never wanted to spend the kind of money on a knife that they ask on knives, but at the same time, I wanted them. So I said, I'm going to try to make them myself. To begin with, I didn't do very well. I wasn't trained. And then I went on to get trained, and it's really been a great thing for me. It's really given me something to express a little bit of artistic endeavor for me personally. But the knives are functional, and I'm real proud of that.
And being a master bladesmither, you are very familiar with the craft. So why were James Black's knife so popular during his time, and what made his knives kind of stand out?
Well, Black was trained as a silver plater in Philadelphia, and he came to Arkansas, and as a blacksmith, too, he was also a blacksmith or was recently trained as a blacksmith during that time period that he was here for a short time in Arkansas. And I can see from looking at his knives that he blended the two, the silver and then the smithing, the blacksmithing. And so he used those two things that he was good at, and he applied them to his knife making. And his work at the time was probably about as good as it come, because a blacksmith, bladesmith, there was not that many of them. And I dare say that most of them that were in the business had heard of each other. So it's like any other business today. If you're in any kind of business or any kind of craft, you know the other names that are in that craft, and you keep up with them, and you compare yourself to them.
Good. And so then, when talking about the Bowie knives, can you tell us about the Jim Bowie connection, and why this story has endured?
Jim Bowie, he was unfortunate enough to have been involved in an altercation on the Mississippi River. And he was nearly killed in the process. And this was one of those duels that we often read about and hear about, which is wrapped up in Arkansas and the Southern history, the history of the South. Well, Jim Bowie saw the value of a knife because he used one to defend himself. He preferred a knife due to the fact that a gun would misfire at times. And so after that occasion, after that terrible incident, the history, or at least written, the writings that we have available lead us to think that he went to James Black and he said, I would like a knife this big with these qualities, and I would like to pick it up, at a later date. Can you do that? And supposedly James Black made the knife that Jim Bowie wanted. And although that knife that James Black made was not the one used on that sandbar fight down in Mississippi, Jim Bowie's name in that fight made the Bowie knife an everyday word, an everyday household word.